Chapter 7 Worse Than the Devil. The offices of New Scotland Yard on Victoria Embankment, overlooking the slowly moving waters of the River Thames, still smelled faintly of new paint in its less travelled corners, having only opened the year before. Mostly, however, it smelled of humans: sweat, paper, tobacco smoke, fear. Within its detective division, Detective Sergeant Norman Bradley felt blessed to have been given, if not an office, at least a quiet corner close by the door to his governor's domain. Detective Inspector Craddock largely left Bradley to get on with it, which suited Bradley well. Occasionally, Craddock would wander out, have a word, drop off a file, wander back in. Also, occasionally, he would call Bradley in to discuss this case or that. Bradley liked Craddock. He was a copper who was in it to set matters aright, not for politics or, heaven forfend, to line his own pocket. One thing he did not miss since leaving Manchester was the stench of Superintendent William Bannister, a man so toweringly corrupt that even the watch committee stood by in thrall and let him do very much as he liked. Not that they'd been bribed, of course, the very thought. He was just finishing off a handwritten report before it was sent to the secretarial pool to be rendered readable and grammatically correct, when he became aware of Mr. William Grant wearing a furious expression and his second-best hat being led by a uniformed constable to Bradley's desk. Bradley, rising, dismissed the constable and gestured to Grant to take a seat. "This is unexpected, Mr. Grant," he said, forgoing the hypocrisy of calling it an unexpected pleasure. "How may I help you?" "I'll not be sitting down," snapped Grant. "And I'm not for staying long either. I just wanted to tell you that next time you send someone after me, they'll be coming back in a tea chest. Do you understand me?" Bradley sat down and steepled his fingers. "No, I don't understand you at all. What on earth makes you think I sent someone after you?" For his answer, Grant snatched off his hat and bent down to show Bradley the right-hand side of his skull. Bradley saw a shallow wound there, obviously fairly fresh. "Been in the wars, Mr. Grant?" "Been in the... Listen to me, you confounded bluebottle. You sent one of your little constables after me to scare me out of London. Well, it won't work, you hear?" The door to Craddock's office opened and the man himself emerged. "Trouble, Bradley?" he asked, drawing on his pipe. "I'm not sure, sir. I'm at a loss. Mr. Grant here seems to think it's the business of the Metropolitan Police to dispatch assassins to confound and injure random citizens." "I see," said Craddock with splendid languor. "I didn't realize we had a budget for assassinations." Grant fumed. "Oh, have your fun." "Most considerate, sir," said Bradley. "But this wound is my proof." "With respect," said Craddock, coming over to study the cut himself, "it proves perhaps that you were attacked, but is hardly sufficient to prove who did it. We might have made a little sport at your expense, sir, but the point is a valid one. The Criminal Investigation Division is not large. We simply do not have spare constables lying around to shadow people on the whim of their superiors. Every minute of police time is logged and pored over by accountants. Why would Detective Sergeant Bradley have dispatched one of these hypothetical coppers after you in any case?" Grant was starting to develop a distinct sense that, yes, he was being ridiculed, but that, in all fairness, he had made himself ridiculous in the first place. Suddenly, he looked like he simply wanted to leave. "He's got it in for me." "Is this true, Bradley?" asked Craddock. "Yes, sir, it is. I believe Mr. Grant to be playing a spiritualism confidence game, and I aim to keep an eye on his activities, his and Miss Cerulia Trent's, In that belief, I visited him a couple of days ago to talk to him. You logged this? It's in my notebook and my daily report. And the point of the visit? Bradley spoke to Craddock, but his gaze never left Grant. To make him understand that preying on the bereaved is vile behavior, and that if I get even one iota of evidence to show he and his colleague had broken the law, I would pursue it to the utmost. Well, said Craddock to Grant, there you have it, sir. D.S. Bradley thinks you're wrong, and I concur. If we're incorrect in that, then you have nothing to fear. There is no evidence to discover, but if you are, well, perhaps you might wish to reconsider your situation. He smiled beneficently at Grant, who had gone very pale. Was there anything else we could help you with? Actually, said Bradley, consulting a file box from the stack on the floor by his desk, perhaps that's something Mr. Grant could help us with. He opened the box, sorted through the papers within, and then produced something that he tossed on the desk. Even without picking it up to examine it, Grant could see what it was. A disc, perhaps 5 inches across, of enameled white metal, with a black number on its face, held in a black leather cover with a loop of cord attached to its top, and where it might be hitched around a coat button, or through and back a coat buttonhole. A cabbie's license. What of it? Even as he said it, he realized that he was on very shaky ground. Well, this license is interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's a fake. Bradley looked intently at Grant's face as he added, not bad work, but some way short of perfect. And secondly, because it was discovered in the pocket of a body found at a high tide mark out of halfway reach. Dressed much like a cabbie, but nobody from the ranks seemed to recognize him. Those that could bear to look at him at all, that is. He tossed another set of files from the box on his desk. Photographs. It can be difficult to recognize someone who's been in the water, I'm told, said Grant, clearly fighting the urge to run, glancing at the pictures. Oh, he was barely in the water, from what can be ascertained. Whoever dropped him in the river didn't have much of an idea how the tides work, and he floated no distance before washing up. No, he's not a pretty sight because he was mutilated. Head partially shaved, and then he was stabbed through the skull and into the brain. My God! Repeatedly. 6 incisions, our Dr. Andrews tells us. Whatever caused the wounds made an awful mess when they were extracted. Emptied the poor fellow's brain pan like a boiled egg. Dr. Andrews is of the opinion that the man was alive when all 6 incisions were made. How he knows that, I have no idea. Clever man, our Dr. Andrews, isn't he, sir? Indeed, he is, said Craddock. His pipe had gone out, and he went to the office's fireplace to light a spill. He returned, sucking on the stem and drawing heat into the recalcitrant tobacco. Funny night for fake cabbies, wasn't it, Bradley? Indeed it was, sir. Then to Grant. That very same night, cabbies on a rank in Kensington, you must know it. It's barely 200 yards from your house. Reported an abandoned cab. And here's the curious thing. The license was a fake, said Grant, barely recognizing his own voice. Exactly that, Mr. Grant. A fake cabbie, fake cab. He leaned forward and smiled a warm smile. That was the most threatening expression Grant had ever seen on a human face in his life. Aren't you going to ask how? If you two were of a pair, the cab made its way to Kensington. Well, that seems likely. Its owner was being horribly murdered out in the distant waste of Barking. The smile faded a tiny fraction. We have a witness that states that the cab was driven by a hatless man who abandoned it and helped away a fashionably dressed young lady who seemed, and I quote, indisposed. He tilted his head towards Craddock. I would guess the witness meant blind drunk by that. Wouldn't you, sir? Craddock nodded. a wise judge. That would be my feeling. Bradley looked Grant in the eye, the smile quite gone. How's your Miss Trent, Mr. Grant? Grant escaped the confines of New Scotland Yard with neither his dignity nor his equilibrium intact. There was some bluster of the "how dare you" variety. He remembered many pressing engagements, and then he left with the sensation of smug Copper's looks burning across the nape of his neck and his shoulder blades. So, the cabbie was dead, and the only clue that the police apparently possessed pointed squarely in Grant's direction. It was pale stuff, but people had danced on thin air at dawn in the yard of Newgate Prison for less. He also dearly wished that Bradley had been less forthcoming about how the man had died. Stabbed was bad enough. He had seen flesh hanging in flaps and scalps dangling off after a thorough kicking after street fights. But in the skull? No knife could do a thing like that, could it? It would scrape along the skull, wouldn't it? Who would do such a thing? It was monstrous, barbaric, un-English. The mental image of Sir Donovan Clay's covey of pet thugs illuminated his mind's eye, and an ugly vista it presented. But even so, 6 deep wounds to the head and the brain missing? Surely even such bully boys wouldn't stoop to that. Surely not. By the time he climbed down from the omnibus, he was convinced that surely, yes. He arrived back at the house and went straight up to Lizzie's rooms, hoping against hope that Miss Church hadn't taken her on another improving jaunt to the library or a museum or similar. She had not, and she opened the door to Grant's knock. "I need a quick word with Miss Trent." Miss Church looked at him steadily. "It's urgent," he added, "and private." "Please enter, Mr. Grant," said a voice from within the parlor that was Lizzie's, but in cadence that was not. He was ushered in, and the door closed behind him with Miss Church, alas, on the inner side. "It's private," he repeated. "Miss Church may hear whatever it is that you need so urgently to impart," said Miss Trent, for it was utterly impossible to think of her as Lizzie Whittle at the moment. "She may not," said Grant, and glowered at the nurse. "This is confidential." "We have no secrets, Miss Church and I," said Miss Trent blandly. She had not once looked up at Grant since he had entered, her attention consumed by the stacks of current newspapers and books she seemed to have accrued somehow in the couple of hours that he'd been away. Grant felt his blood heat and did not know whether it was in response to the situation as it stood or a reaction to his recent fright. In either case, he took a count of 5 before he replied for fear of what he might say. "You might not, although I doubt that, but I do." He turned to the nurse. "Miss Church, wait outside if you'd be so kind." Miss Church looked him in the eye, and the lack of concern for anything he might have to say was shockingly evident. "I take my orders from Miss Trent," she said. As she said it, her gaze slid to her charge, and Grant was astonished and disturbed to see a light of admiration, perhaps even adoration, kindle there. "You damn well take them from me," he said, failing to count to 5 on this occasion. "I pay you, girl, and don't you forget it." "I shall pay Miss Church in future," said Miss Trent. She considered her words and added, "I shall pay her in pounds, shillings, and pennies." William Grant looked at her for a long moment then, and understood at last that his Lizzie was utterly gone. The anger guttered in him, and he sighed out the smoke of its passing. "The police are definitely interested in us. They have no evidence of wrongdoing, but they're taking a strong interest." "Why would the police be interested in you?" said Miss Church. Grant bristled at the interruption. With the best will in the world, miss, that would be none of your business. Miss Church ignored him and said to Miss Trent, Police interference will complicate matters. Grant frowned at her. What? What are you talking about? Instead of providing an answer, Miss Church offered another question. Do the police know where you live? Do they know about these rooms? Grant had the distinct sense that the whole conversation was getting away from him. Yes, they came here. Look, just... What? No, you're dismissed. Just go. I'll send along a day's wages. She didn't go, but Grant ignored her as if she had, in the hope and expectation that she would go away if he ignored her long enough. He turned to Miss Trent. It's only a matter of time before Bradley turns up on the doorstep and starts asking difficult questions. We have to go. Now. Today. Miss Trent was distracted by her books and papers once more. No, she said. Grant scoffed indignantly. No. Do you realize how much trouble we could be in, Lizzie? He used her real name because he disliked the artificiality of using her pseudonym at the best of times. As he said it, however, it struck him that Lizzie was just as irrelevant to the woman sitting before him. Please, will you just trust me? We have to leave before Bradley starts building a case against us. France won't be far enough. Italy, perhaps. We could go to Italy. You may go to Italy, said Miss Cerulia Trent, as she balanced two books in her hands, comparing the text. Our work is here. Your work? He looked at her aghast. Your work? Lizzie, Miss Trent, you have to trust me when I say that matters are becoming very serious. The police will come again, and they may do so with warrants. You will not be safe here. Please, I beg of you, come with me, at least until this all blows over. Miss Trent closed both books simultaneously with sharp percussions. It will not blow over. Miss Trent, said Miss Church, a warning in her tone. Miss Trent ignored her and instead transfixed Grant with that cold gaze. I am important to you, am I not? Grant was startled by the question, but then felt forced into a corner by it. He glanced at Miss Church and then at Miss Trent. Lizzie, he said, an appeal in his tone. You feel that I am necessary to your happiness. Is that true? He didn't know how to reply. Miss Trent, said Miss Church with a strange tautness in her voice. It is his world as well, said Miss Trent. He isn't ready. Miss Trent put down her books, arose from her chair, and approached Grant. She stood before him as if studying a wondrous statue in a gallery, reached out and touched the side of his face. You are home to such emotions. It is one of the reasons that I admire you. A fleeting existence, but one of such inner colors. Lizzie, please, come away with me. Do you love Elizabeth Whittle? She said it quietly, but he heard every word with pure clarity. Yes, he said. He wanted to weep. Yes, with all my heart. Then you have a reason to stand and fight, William Grant, she said. She nodded then to Miss Church. Grant started to turn to look at the nurse, but then the room became dark and boundless, and he knew no more. Even within the well of sleep, one knows when one is sleeping well, and that knowledge runs easily into resentment should anyone or anything threaten its serenity. Grant bridled a little when he heard the voice in the darkness, but it was Lizzie's voice, so the irritation lasted only as long as it took to make that realization. Do you hear me? In the blackness of his dreamless sleep, the first sound of the sentence came heavily, like a drop of oil falling into dark water and spreading in a refractive rainbow meniscus. But the darkness was all-encompassing and existed in all dimensions, not merely two. There was height and time, and another sort of time Grant had never noticed before and was reasonably sure his pocket watch ignored, and so many more besides. The oil of the sound itself split into colors, and he did not recognize all of them with his eyes, nor even the extremes of a vision he had never before experienced, but now instinctively understood that he had always possessed. The colors of the oil drop spread in all possible cardinal directions, and he knew them. This one was consequence, this was permanence, this vibrant shade was tangence. He did not care for the color of space.
I regret this necessity, but it is your battle too, William Grant.
He wondered at those last sounds for a moment, until he remembered that they constituted his name. It took him a moment longer still to recall what a name was. A ludicrous concept, to be sure. How could leaden syllables define him? He was a collection of colors, a pulse of vibrations. He had not chosen his name, and it was no sort of description either.
I am preserving your sanity by disrupting it. I am saving your mind by destroying it. You have no choice but to trust me, and since you have no choice, I have no need to lie to you. And I say to you, William Grant, you can trust me. We are allies.
He wished Lizzie would stop using his name. It distracted him every time. He could see every William who ever was, and every William who would ever be, every Grant who ever was, and every Grant who would ever be. And he could see their interactions like pinholes in two cards lined up and held to the light, a sky of stars, and every one of them a William Grant. There he was, over there, the dim, unimportant dot of disreputable light who finangled money out of the bereaved. It saddened him to let the constellations down like that.
My name is not Cerulia Trent. My name is not Elizabeth Whittle. My name is...
And there was her true name, a spattering of colors that were not colors, the pattern as important as the hues, a name to conjure with, a name of which to be proud. It was the name of one who was trusted, courageous, experienced, stalwart. It was the name of a hero. Just not, William Grant observed in a state of Olympian detachment, the name of a human. Or even, he observed equably, any creature that he had previously understood as a creature. This was all very interesting, and his curiosity colored the cosmos. He was understanding the colors so much better now, and indeed, it was so risibly simple that he wondered why he didn't usually communicate in such a manner, although a deeper knowledge cradled in his brain told him they were not truly colors, any more than humming a passage of music constitutes a full orchestra. There was something greater still, but he was so taken by paddling in the shallows of this new ontological ocean that he was content to limit his perceptions to it. If he let them, the colors would tell him stories. He liked stories, and besides, these seemed important, so he sat back and watched them unfurl like the northern lights that he'd only ever seen in a painting. Unlike the painting, they danced and trembled and told the tale of a people who had dispensed with their bodies long since, and now lived by seeking out new bodies of races on the cusp of thought. Grant, who only knew that evolution was some nonsense about monkeys, was immediately and smoothly inculcated into an understanding of natural selection that would have staggered any professor of natural history by its erudite totality. Here he stood on earth long, long before Moses, before Adam, and here was such a species thrown together by natural processes in a form less lovely than some of the fish he'd seen on the market. He was not frightened by them, however, for life is as life does, and live and let live, and other homilies that he found comforting, even if how they applied to great conical beasts that slid around seemed unimportant in that moment. The race that was without bodies found the cone creatures and occupied them, and were happy to do so, for they could not survive otherwise. In any event, the cone things were an evolutionary squib and would die out shortly in any case. And the bodiless ones knew that because a new idea came to him, and its scale hurt his mind. He could not accept. He would not accept it. Better his mind shatter like a dropped stoneware pint mug than accept such a small pain in his arm, an expression of concern. Where was he? Oh, yes, cone things. The bodiless knew that the cone things would die out because time was not aligned to them, but something more like a field in which they roamed about. Well, then, it was child's play to understand that they would therefore be able to see the cone creature's imminent extinction. Such things happen all the time, and that is good, because now the bodiless ones could take the cone creatures as their new bodies, secure in the knowledge that they would not take away the eventualities of a new race, because those eventualities were never to pass. It was very elegant. If Grant had been able to remember what cheering was, he would have cheered the bodiless ones. It was just like taking to the lifeboats, after all. And that was why they had never taken over humanity, because humanity was not destined for a short existence. A whole stalk of grass in the meadow of time, that was humanity's lot, and it was not so bad. Yes, the bodiless ones were perfectly capable of taking human bodies, but never permanently, only as explorers into other parts of the meadow. After all, wasn't that what had befallen? There was a necessary corollary, and it scrabbled at Grant's heightened awareness. It came laden with emotional debris from the base creature he had been before, like a ship's anchor brought up with all manner of fouling from the seabed. It stank, and he shied away from it. He should not be distracted by that. There was so much more to understand. But these were not his own thoughts. Where were they coming from? There was warmness in their tone, and he thought of Lizzie. But Lizzie was in the next room, and the voice that was hers was not using her words. He could see new colors, smell emotions, taste time on his tongue like salt. He could also see a flickering gas mantle, smell damp brickwork, taste his own blood in his mouth. When he realized the reality of it all, felt his bonds and knew that he was tied to a chair in some dank cellar somewhere, he could have screamed with the frustration of everything that he had lost and all he must now endure. "What are you?" he cried at Miss Cerulia Trent. "What have you done to her?" Miss Trent approached, and he scented the hues of trust, courage, experience, and determination. As she had done before, she placed her hand on his cheek and looked him in the eye.
Elizabeth Whittle is safe and healthy and being well looked after. We do not do what we have done lightly. We are not cruel, but we are desperate. We face total extermination. Humanity faces decimation and slavery. We, you and I, face a mutual enemy. Will you help us?
He had no words. The foreshortening of his senses back into the confines of his skull and skin was the most terrible loss he had ever endured. No, it was only almost the most terrible loss. Behind him, he heard Miss Church say,
"It's useless, Master. He's just a tuppenny halfpenny confidence man. He's never given a tinker's cuss about anyone but himself."
Miss Trent had never looked away from his eyes.
"I do not believe that to be entirely true in this case," she said.
"Lizzie's all right?" he asked.
"I will never lie to you, Mr. Grant. Elizabeth Whittle is alive and well."
"It?" he echoed. "But she's in the past." He thought of the immensity of the meadow of time. "She's long dead."
"Only if we do not transpose minds once more. If I succeed in my mission in this present, she will be reunited with this body, and I shall return to mine.
And if you fail?
Then I shall die in this present. She shall die in the past. You will likely die too." "She's telling the truth, Mr. Grant," said Miss Church.
"I know," he replied. "I know that." He looked down at his left arm, the sleeve rolled up, the tourniquet on his bicep, the needle marks on the inside of his elbow. He'd seen opium and laudanum fiends and listened to their experiences. Whatever he had been given was certainly not of that ilk, but he had nevertheless been drugged, his sanity disrupted to preserve it, his mind saved from being destroyed, if only temporarily. "I can't help you," he began, and heard Miss Church sigh, but he ignored her and continued. "Tied to a chair, I will do anything within my power to restore Lizzie, even if I have to fight the devil to do it." Miss Trent's unblinking gaze continued a moment longer, then a nod to Miss Church, who started to undo Grant's bonds.
"You have to fight worse than the devil, Mr. Grant,"
she said quietly to him as she worked.
"You have to fight Sir Donovan Clay."